Welcome to a special edition of the Darden Admissions podcast. I'm your host, Brett Woody, and you are listening to a new episode. On this episode of the podcast, we're excited to feature a recent conversation from the Women at Darden event series. This conversation features Admissions Dean Dawna Clarke, as well as Senior Associate Dean for Professional Degree Programs Yael Grushka-Cockayne. Yael is also Professor of Business Administration, the Alltech Styslinger Foundation Bicentennial Chair in Business Administration, and a member of the Quantitative Analysis faculty group here at the Darden School of Business. So without further ado, here is a conversation between Admissions Dean Dawna Clarke and Senior Associate Dean Yael Grushka-Cockayne.
I'm excited to introduce an absolute rock star member of the Quantitative Analysis faculty, Yael Grushka-Cockayne. I am going to tell you from the get-go that you're in for a treat. We did one of these webinars last year, and I think every single participant, including myself, walked away wanting to know more about project management and decision science and forecasting. So be prepared to have a new passion when this webinar ends. Yael's research and teaching focus on data science, forecasting, project management, and behavioral decision making. As an aside, after this webinar, we're going to send you a follow-up, and there are a couple of videos that Yael has done. One, an incredibly riveting video on project management. Highly recommend that you watch that after the webinar. Her research is published in numerous academic and professional journals, and she is a regular speaker at international conferences in the areas of decision analysis, project management, and management science. She is also an award-winning teacher who recently returned to Darden after teaching at Harvard Business School. In 2014, Yael was named one of the 21 thought leaders, professors in data science. I've really enjoyed working with Yael on the dean staff. She is a senior associate dean for professional degree programs at Darden. I think she's involved in so many initiatives at Darden that we're excited to tell you about, including scholarship work and planning the upcoming inaugural Women in Leadership Summit in Roslyn next month. So welcome, Yael, and welcome to all of our participants.
Thank you, Dawna. Thank you for including me. Thank you for inviting me to join you at this webinar. It's so fun to see even the locations and the little chat, the 2 minutes of the back and forth in the chat has already put a smile on my face. So,
good. Well, it's like one of the silver linings of COVID is doing these kinds of webinars that are so inclusive of students from all over the world. And, we have a record number of international students coming to the full-time MBA program this year. Our international students are a really vital part of our community. And speaking of international students, you have a really interesting international background. Can you tell people a little bit about your international background, Yael?
Yes, of course. So I don't know if I've told you this before, Dawna, maybe you know this, that I actually was born in New Jersey, which doesn't sound that international. I was born in Passaic, New Jersey, but I never lived there actually, really. My parents were on sabbatical. My father was an academic as well. And so we traveled around a lot. He was Israeli. My mom is American, New York born, and they met in the US at Cornell, different school. But shortly after I was born, we went back and forth a little bit between Israel and here, and we ended up settling there when I was about, 3, just shy of 4. So I was a little toddler. Couldn't speak Hebrew, couldn't speak English. I had all my languages mixed up because we were back and forth so much during those early ages. And so I ended up growing up in Israel, doing my school years there. I did military service for 3 years. So all Israeli citizens end up doing military service. I did mine as an ordnance officer. I was an officer. I served kind of in the 90s. I'll reveal my age a bit. And then after that, I traveled the world a little bit. I got my engineering degree in Israel still. So my undergrad is from Ben-Gurion University. I'm an industrial engineer by training. And then I worked for a few years in San Francisco. And then I left Israel. So I've been away from Israel for a while now, over 20 years. Ended up settling in London for quite a while. Yeah. My husband is British, and so I have family there. Did my master's at LSE, at London School of Economics, and my PhD from the London Business School before coming to Charlottesville. So all over. But my immediate family is in Israel. My husband's immediate family is in England. So
yeah, I mean, a really cool international background, and I'm also a proud Jersey girl. So I'm glad to hear those New Jersey roots as well. I watched a video about sort of some of the early inspiration to teach. Could you talk about, from a very early age, you were interested in teaching? Can you tell us about that? Because it's such a great story about knowing kind of what you might want to do early in your
Yeah, I mean, ever since I remember myself, I mean, I feel like it's a little bit of a cliche. I mean, I've heard other professors, maybe not a cliche. I mean, maybe it's not a coincidence that people who end up being professors dreamt about being a teacher all their lives. So it's not totally bizarre. But my girlfriends, who I've known some since the age of 2, always remember when we, role played or, had all kinds of fantasies, I would always be a teacher in those. For some reason, I know that my first grade teacher was very instrumental in affecting me, and she was always somebody I looked up to, and maybe that's what got me started. I can't really pinpoint it. My father was an academic and a professor who always viewed his job more of a luxury that he gets to do his hobby as a job because he loved it so much. So I think that there are many different influences, but I all along, it was a pretty strong current in my life. I was tutoring classmates at the age of 10. I was, TAing from my early days in my undergrad. I was in scouts and an instructor, always in instruction mode. And even in the military, I was trained as a train the trainer kind of role. So it seemed to be a repeated theme of mine where I really enjoy and kind of get satisfaction from taking complicated ideas and making them accessible to many different individuals, either, very sophisticated at a very sophisticated level if they're advanced learners, but even introducing sophisticated topics to learners who have less background. I think that I enjoy finding new ways to present ideas, new ways to make ideas accessible, and new ways to think about pitching them so people can internalize them. So that's what teaching is for me.
Yeah, and I am not surprised to hear what a long-term passion this has been for you. For everybody in the audience, I mentioned one of the teaching awards that Yael received, but she has received so many accolades and is such a beloved member of the faculty. Can you tell our participants a little bit about what you teach? And everyone, I'm going to put my shade down because the light has changed, and I'm just going to put that down while Yael is telling you a little bit about her subject matters that she teaches at Darden.
Of course. So, and the sun is very strong in Charlottesville today. So I teach a few courses on a regular basis. I definitely teach, I've been teaching project management for 7-8 years now. It's an elective course for our residential students. I've actually taught it with our executive students this year too. It's an elective that folks take in their second year. And it's all about managing projects, everything from event planning to software design to construction. Many MBA students find themselves in project management roles, either formally or informally. They're just expected to know these skills, how to be efficient with your time, how to think about sequencing and prioritization. And not many people realize that there are actually formal tools that can be very helpful. So that's one of my passions and a topic that I do a lot of research on. And I teach, and it's been pretty successful elective. I have 2 sections, pretty big group. And it's very satisfying because almost everybody ends up using these tools and insights later in their jobs. I just met a student who is starting at Microsoft, and she mentioned that she was using some principles that I introduced her in the course. So that's one course. Another course that I teach is decision analysis. So the area I belong to at Darden is called Quantitative Analysis. And we teach a core class in decision analysis. It's how to make decisions, think about risks and uncertainties, think about, a little bit of statistics and probability. How does probability or an uncertain future affect your decision-making? What kind of tools can you use to make decisions robust and to justify them to others and to feel like you're thinking critically? So that's a great course, core course. Everybody has to take it. There's some Excel in that. There's some tools. There's some, more sophisticated statistical tools, but it's a great methods course that gives students exposure to a lot of different tools that they use in other contexts. And then finally,
what a relevant class. And you mentioned uncertainty a little while ago, and we're living in such uncertain times. I mean, what an important skill set to have to help navigate leading during uncertainty.
Totally. I mean, in business, there's always uncertainty. If there's a sure thing, then somebody would have already capitalized on. There's no real certainty in decisions, and they've definitely true, Dawna, that decisions have just become more and more complex with added uncertainty and awareness of the impact of uncertainty. So the course helps students understand a little bit more how they should be thinking about it, what they can do, different attitudes, some behavioral components. So it's very relevant and timely. And then finally, I've taught several years a course in data science, anything from programming in R and Python, working with Tableau, SQL. I don't teach it this coming year. I don't have it on my docket to teach because other faculty are teaching it next year, but I've taught it in the past and I may teach it in the future. And
I'm hearing that there's really high demand for those skills among recruiters. So this is a really important skill set to have as a potential MBA graduate.
Yeah. So, right. So I think you nailed it with that last kind of caveat. As an MBA, as somebody graduating with an MBA, I think the skills of programming and data science are very sought after, but it's the combination, it's the MBA with those technical skills that is really that kind of killer combination in my mind, because recruiters and companies really need capable leaders that work with the technical teams and work with the operations teams and the business and the marketers and kind of lead the organization forward. And that translator role is really hard to come around. And our students, I think, are just ideally positioned. Their breadth is very solid and strong. That's what they get from the core. They have, they know how to think on their feet because of the case method and the discussion orientation. And I believe that that's the best mode to learn data science and to take it with the right kind of attitude. We're not developing coders around writing the most efficient recursive algorithm. That's a different type of course. That's not what our goal here. If somebody wants that, we can do that too. I love coding and I love obsessing about coding efficiently, but that's not really what I believe our students here need. Here, we're talking really about understanding a business problem, understanding where the data and the data science and the technique comes into play, understanding how to make sense of it and kind of, improving and making your best business decision moving forward. So,
there's a comment from the audience saying, love hearing about SQL and Tableau usage. And by the way, everyone, we are going to take your questions. I have some questions for Yael, but just if you have questions that you'd like to ask Yael, please post them in the Q&A. I'd love to go back a little bit because you talked about your love of teaching ever since you were a child. And then when you talked about, the fact that you worked in the military for the mandatory service for the Israeli government for 3 years and worked in San Francisco. What prompted your passion for these areas enough to go back and get your master's and PhD from LSE in London?
Well, first, the first thing that I would point to, and I think there's a video out there that talks about it.
There is. That's why I'm asking you, because it was so interesting to watch.
It's funny because I just met. There's a friend of mine that comes up in the store, and I just saw her after many years of not seeing her, so it was nice to reconnect. But when I finished my military service, I didn't know what I wanted to do for my undergrad. In Israel, we do them in reverse. We go first to the military and then we go to the university. We go get our bachelor's. So I started my bachelor's degree when I was like 22, right? So like you do it at a little bit more, a little bit of an older age than you would here in the US. But I wasn't sure exactly what I wanted to do. I knew I loved maths and science and physics and chemistry, but I didn't necessarily want to go and study those more kind of natural sciences. So I was looking at, okay, what else can I do? And one of my best friend's dad at the time, he knew me very well as a child, and he knew what I did in the military and how much I liked like processes and efficiency. And I worked with Gantt charts, and I worked with the logistics and the planning aspects. And he recommended industrial engineering, which at the time was a fairly up and coming kind of area. And I dug in, did some research, and I realized that it's really true that it's almost like applied math. It's very practical, so it has a relevance in the real world, but it is technical too. There's a lot of mathematics, there's a lot of optimization, there's a lot of use of statistics, and you need to understand the numeric side of things and have a fairly solid quants. And so it was kind of the best of both worlds. It allowed me to bring some rigor and mathematics to a very practical set of tools that were relevant to people out there. And so that was always a running theme. It was there from when I started my studies. I loved it, and I really enjoyed every day in my undergrad. And then when I worked in San Francisco, I was selling ERP systems. I don't know if folks online know what ERP systems are, enterprise resource planning. Typically, I say that with a smile because when people hear about it, nobody really likes ERP systems. They're big, complicated systems that have people in trauma if they had to go through a transformation or so on. But when I was selling that and working with decision makers and companies, I really missed kind of developing theory that leaders wanted to learn and apply. And I specifically realized that projects were not being thought of at a strategic and executive level, but they were left for project managers to manage at a kind of lower level of the organization. And there wasn't this recognition that if their projects were run poorly, it would affect the company's performance. And so I wanted to go back to school. I missed the teaching, I missed the research, and I decided to go back and focus exactly on that, on like project management project management, strategic decisions, how do projects get sourced, selected, managed, and how do decisions get made throughout, which is what I ended up doing. So,
and that must be such a relevant background. In addition to Yael's really an impressive teaching background, she is a senior associate dean for professional degree programs at Darden, sits on the dean's staff, is an integral part of a number of initiatives, including the Women at Darden initiative that we're going to talk about later. I would imagine that all the project management that you teach is so helpful to you personally as you're juggling all of this.
Yes, sometimes I think I don't use it enough. Sometimes I think, oh my goodness, like, isn't there a statement about the cobbler walks barefoot? Or
yes,
so sometimes I feel a little bit like that, where I'm not managing as good as I should. But it definitely helps. It definitely helps me think about. So there's a technical term, project management, called the critical path. People often think that the critical path has to do with the criticality of the work. But the critical path is really about the sequencing and the timing. So whatever takes the longest is, it's important to identify, because that's going to determine the length of your project, and everything else has slack. And so that thinking, that identification of focusing on tasks that have the longest duration that will affect your completion time, that is something that I do, think about often and take it into account when I execute, and it helps me. Research projects are very hard to project manage. Actually, they're probably some of the hardest projects to project manage, because there's so much uncertainty and you don't really know where your research is going. And there's very little external deadline. So it's an interesting project management challenge for all of us.
I would imagine. Can you tell everyone a little bit about your role as Senior Associate Dean for Professional Degree Programs at Darden?
Yes, I would love to. So I think you mentioned earlier, I took a 2-year leave of absence and I went to Harvard Business School. I served on their faculty in the TOM unit in the Technology and Operations Management. I taught there. I met wonderful, wonderful individuals and spent a great 2 years in Boston. When I came back, I took a leadership role, which allows me to focus and lead the MBA programs for professional students. And when we say professional students, that's the term we have for students that have full-time jobs. They don't take 2 years off to move to Charlottesville and do a residential program, but they keep working, they live at home, and they have busy lives. And in addition to that, they have classes in the evenings, classes on weekends, and they get their MBA in addition to everything else. So we have an executive format, and we have a part-time format, and I am the leader of those programs. So everything from planning the curriculum to identifying opportunities to make the programs better, new courses, new sequencing, new features of the program. The students have to travel abroad at least once, quite a few of them, about a third of them go abroad 4 times. We call that the GEMBA. It's a global executive format. So working on that and planning those, making sure that our students have everything they need to balance their very busy lives between school and their professional lives. And I don't work alone, of course. I have an incredible staff team that lead the program, that are there for the students, work with them on all the weekends and help them through it. And we also have over a dozen, about 15 or so faculty that form a program committee that help me really think through all of the various practices and procedures and different norms that we have for that program to keep thinking about making it even better for our students. So developing new courses, developing new opportunities for them. We, for instance, a new innovation that we came up with was a DC-based course. So the students happen to, many of them live about 2/3 live in the DC area because they work there too, for these executive formats. And so, but they don't really know, or they don't spend time meeting with a lot of business leaders. They meet some through their work, but we have a residency in DC where we go around and we meet with just unique companies that come together in the DC area. And it's just another global kind of insight to why DC is what it is and what are unique features of having such a capital, the US capital, a strong city on an international radar, but what kind of business landscape that allows.
Yael, you mentioned just a little while ago having been at HBS for 2 years. Can you tell everybody a little bit about some of the factors that led you to come back to Darden?
Of course. So I missed it. I mean, this was my home before I went there. Darden is much smaller. And so only because of that, but this is also a choice, right? To keep it small, but like the size and the attitude and the focus here is on the community and the learning experience. And that was very important to me. That's something I'm very passionate about. We view our classroom as very, sacred to us, and we care about what takes place in that room. And everybody gets to know everybody. So at graduation, we know, as faculty know, I wouldn't say 100% of the students, but we get to know, 70, 80% of them. That kind of intimate feel and accountability and personalization was something that I missed. Harvard has a lot of amazing people, but it's bigger, and it has a lot of other benefits, but it's just bigger, and that focus is slightly different from the nature of a place that has, triple the number of individuals. And so I missed that. And I missed the entrepreneurial spirit of the faculty. Here, faculty are really experimental and kind of like, a little bit, each one of us is a whole enterprise trying to do things, trying to create new things. So it pulled me back.
Yeah. And just in case people are not aware, we're really proud that Darden has been ranked the top educational experience and for having the top teaching faculty by The Economist for 10 consecutive years. So when Yael was talking about how strong the educational experience is, we're really grateful and to have that acknowledgement from The Economist. So something for you to research after the webinar as well. We are taking live questions from the audience, so please feel free to put them in the chat. Yael, can you talk a little bit about the case method specifically and how, the benefits of the case method broadly, but also maybe just a little bit on how the case method may benefit women specifically?
Yeah, great. And I see a bunch of excellent questions in the Q&A, so I'm sure that we can weave them in with this topic too. So the case method, a lot of people use the term case method, and I think not everybody means the same thing when they say that. So let me explain a little bit what we here at Darden talk about when we use the phrase case method. Sometimes people may use the terms Socratic method. Recently, I've heard a lot of our faculty talk about student-centered learning. There's a few components to it. First, students read a case. The case is almost always, rare occasions it's not, but almost always a real story of a real protagonist facing a decision problem in practice. So companies, individuals maybe this is based on public sources. So whoever wrote the case used public information. Sometimes it's based on private information, like interviewing the company and getting firsthand access to a decision moment in a company's life, where our faculty go and do some field work with that company. And students have to typically consult or put themselves in the protagonist's role and then give advice on what would you do? What would you do if you were the protagonist? What would you do if you were in the role of that decision maker? And the case has typically enough information to make that decision, or at least the same kind of information that the protagonist in reality would have had, maybe. If something is missing, then the students will have to identify what missing information they would go out and seek. But it's trying to really put the student in that position of a decision maker for a few reasons. One, there is really no better way at getting better at making business decisions than practicing. So like facing that kind of situation where there's a tough decision to make with a lot of different things to consider is realistic. It's what business leaders do all the time. And so practicing it here in our classroom over 300 cases is the best way to get better at it. In reality, there is no manual at the bottom of the drawer that tells you, oh, for this decision, this is the right framework to use. But decisions have to be made, and decision makers and our leaders, our students, have to make decisions all the time based on their common sense or based on whatever they've learned here that fits that scenario. And so we're really developing that capability to face a situation, figure out what's the best set of tools to use, and come to a decision that people feel comfortable with, being challenged. So it's a discussion environment. People challenge each other in a collaborative way, help each other build ideas up, help each other solidify kind of weaknesses in a proposal, and kind of maybe improve scenarios. So it really tries to mimic reality in the sense that individuals that graduate from Darden go out to make amazing decisions all the time, surrounded by a lot of, a team and members that help them and not on their own, using kind of messy and incomplete information. So that's what the case method does. That's what the Socratic method does. And it's really learning by asking. It's also, how do you ask the right questions? How do you dig in and demystify a situation by asking a lot of questions? So we as faculty demonstrate that. We never answer. We only ask more questions. Students start asking each other questions. And it's really helping them understand that by listening to each other and being active listeners and asking the right questions, they will dig into a root cause that will allow them to make a good decision. So that's the process. I really am a big fanatic of this method and why I think it's better than lectures, but we can talk about that in a moment. You asked a little bit about specifically about women in our classroom. And I say this out of maybe some years of experience here at Darden, but also just being a woman myself. And in the sense that I think it is really empowering to help, to ask the right question at the right time, and to help others around you and to kind of influence people by bringing them on board through that kind of discovery process. So like practicing this notion that when we make these decisions, we kind of are humbled a little bit. We strip of our ego and we actually try to raise all the things that we don't know in order to kind of come to a resolution and move forward. Walking into the classroom saying, this is the right answer and we're done, is definitely not going to go that far, because you really want to make a recommendation, rationalize your recommendation, get a lot of input, and kind of solidify your perspective. And I actually think that, and of course, women are very different from each other. Not everybody's the same, and men are all different from each other. But this notion of individuals that flourish in our classroom are ones that are willing to listen to other people. They learn the value of listening even more so through the classroom. They're willing to admit when they change their mind or they rethought something. They're willing to admit, they're willing to recognize what they're hearing from peers and from people around them. And then they gain comfort and move on. And I've seen women do that really, really well. Of course, I've seen men do that really well as well. But it's all this notion about a classroom that is about not an individual self, but it's about a group coming together to make ultimate the choice. And we all walk away empowered. We all walk away with a new set of capabilities, but we do it in a way that brings us together first and allows us to collaborate on that process and recognize that decision-making is not about an individual, but it's about a group of people. It's about a process. It's about improving over time. And I think that that's something that many of our women find appealing.
Yeah, and I think that is such a great answer. There was a question from Brianna about what is the largest advantage you believe post-MBA women from Darden encounter in the workplace? And I think your response to the previous question was probably very encapsulating of this question.
Yeah, I do think that from conversations with our alums, which I'm very close to, I went with 2 of them yesterday to the Lady Gaga show and met a bunch of others. Really, the benefits of this approach are in the long term, right? The transformation occurs here, and it is very noticeable for our students. But the benefits are years to come after, when you go out and in the workplace, you're comfortable to roll your sleeves up. People come to our classroom ready to engage, because I will never provide an answer. So I will start off by saying, Dawna, what do you recommend? So you need to be willing to roll your sleeves up, take the conversation, lead a conversation, corral a group of individuals around your approach and your perspective, maybe share your screen, walk people through your analysis, look at somebody else's, ask their questions. So that kind of capability in the workplace is really valuable, and not all are used to it. And so our students tend to be very comfortable in those settings, and our women as part of that. It's not about going and hiding in your office and doing some analysis and then coming up with a deck that is fully fledged and ready to go. No, it's about this notion of, okay, where do we start? How do we make sense of a messy situation? And our students become very, very good. And it's obvious to employers later.
Yeah, and you said a word that I hear a lot from students, and that is engaging. And you all might imagine just how engaging a classroom is when you have somebody like Yael leading you through a case discussion. I think that's very energizing. There's a great question from Jenna in the chat asking if you faced any hardships in academia and how did you overcome them, specifically as a woman?
So academia, like many other fields, there's some areas in academia that have different distribution in terms of men and women. In business specifically, there are more male faculty than female faculty. So I think the majority of business schools hover around the 30% female faculty, if I'm not mistaken. And even within the different areas and units, it's not always balanced. So in some areas, you'll find more female faculty than in others. I think some of the challenges in academia are the challenges of women in many places. I have 2 kids, having a family, having outside obligations, and juggling is never easy. And sometimes I have a equal sharing partner. If not, he carries the load in some ways. While I driving back from Lady Gaga, he took my son to camp today and yesterday. But I think it's so some of the struggles are the same, right? Like we hit our prime, and as an academic, we work on something called, many of us work towards tenure, which is you work for 7 years, and either you can stay or you are asked to leave, which is a pretty big kind of gate. And those years, coincide with your 30s. Okay, so it's those years. For me, they happen to coincide with my 30s until I got my PhD. It's a long career trajectory. So, undergrad, PhD. I just started as a professor in my early 30s. I was heavy into my tenure process in my late 30s and my 40s, early 40s, and that's exactly prime years in terms of kids at home and raising a family. So some of those struggles are similar across domains. It's not unique to academia, but it's definitely challenging when there's a lot of things you need to accomplish. In academia, it's hard because there's no real time. I can do my research at 3 a.m. I can do my research at 5 a.m, and I can do my research at 2 p.m. I just need to do it. And so when it's so self-led and so entrepreneurial, that also implies that you have to figure it out, right? It's up to me to kind of balance my life cycle and balance my time. And it's not always easy to do, right?
Sure.
So those are some challenges, just the nature of the work, and research is slow and it takes a long stretch of time, and you need to be writing and sometimes traveling to meet co-authors and companies. And so that's pretty hard. In addition to that, I think that there's, like many other industries, still certain biases that we face and situations where, there are fewer because of the numbers, but also maybe because of just historical trends. There are fewer women in leadership roles. There are fewer women on editorial boards, fewer female reviewers, fewer female editors and associate editors and panelists in conferences. And so when I was, earlier on in my career, there was a bit more of a void in terms of role models. There are some unbelievable role models that helped me significantly, but there aren't as many maybe. And then as things are shifting and there's more awareness, now that I'm more senior, I also get called upon to serve in those roles, which is wonderful, and I'm honored. But then I'm also pulled really thin because I'm sitting on, I'm juggling editorial roles in 4 different journals, and I just don't have enough time to do everything. But the representation matters, and so if I'm not doing it, there aren't that many. Still not enough women in the field, so we something has to give. So those are some typical struggles, and I think it's the same in many different industries. Yeah.
How do you manage your energy? I mean, I think one of your signature strengths is you have this contagious energy level. And how do you manage that? And related to, all the things you're juggling. I know you're a runner, for example.
Yeah,
tell us a little bit about channeling this fantastic energy.
Well, I'm not sure I would do it very well. So let's just start with that. I do have a lot of energy, and I've always had a lot of relatively high levels of energy. So I'm an energetic person. I just, the other day I was thinking to myself, I'm so lucky that I get paid to do the job that I love to do so much. I get so much joy and satisfaction. So that just fills me up with excitement and enthusiasm.
It definitely comes across, Yael.
Every day. I do love running, and I do make sure to make time for that. So I think that that's really important. I like music and live music. I like movies and shows. I love fashion and shoes. There's things that I love. And when I say it, Dawna, you're smiling because you know that I love those things too, right? So
yes.
Part of that is because, I don't know, personally, and this is a personal choice. I don't think it's true for everybody, but I kind of feel comfortable being myself and bringing myself to my work. So I show up that way. It's not that I try to leave that at home. And so by doing that, I think that for me, that allows me to bring that enthusiasm because I'm showing up as myself, right? So I walk.
Yeah, that's the authenticity is so important to, joy, and wonderful that you're in an environment where you can be your authentic self, and we all benefit from that. There's a nice comment in here from David Cleary. He says, not a question, but can't wait to start learning from you, Yael, and the rest of the Darden faculty. He's starting MBA in 6 days. So David, we look forward to greeting you.
Yeah.
Okay, and I'm just going to take a look at some of the other questions in here. Let's talk a little bit about the Women at Darden initiative. What drew you to be involved in the Women at Darden initiative? Can you tell everybody a little bit about that initiative, as they may not know about it yet?
Yes, of course. So we have a Women at Darden initiative. Some folks know because I think I think it was showcased a little bit in the invite for this event, but we know what Darden can give our female students. There are great benefits to all of our students, male and female. But specifically talking about women, sometimes women are not sure where to go to business school. They're not sure if to go to business school. They're not really sure if they want to be in business in general. So tackling or having conversation with women at various stages of their process, encouraging them that there is a role for women in business, that they're vital for the workplace and can add a lot and bring a lot to the table is part of this kind of general philosophy. But specifically, what is it about Darden that empowers them and strengthens them to succeed long term? The community focus, the accountability, the humbleness of our case method, the ability to kind of reward doers, because it's a get your hands dirty and execute kind of place, from the case method and in the class and showing up for class to everything that the students do, co-curriculum. Everything is about getting stuff done and getting involved. I think that's also an environment that many women can flourish. And also the case method is about diversity of thought. And we have such an array of backgrounds in our classrooms. Really, there is no one profile of a student with a specific background that needs to enter here. Actually, the more varied and interesting and just different your background, we encourage that and love that and celebrate in the classroom because it really builds on our case method and our approach to solving business problems. And I think that all of that is in favor of women. So these initiatives focus on and spreading the news. So like going out there, meeting with female candidates, or not even, they don't know that they're a candidate or potential kind of applicants, before trying to encourage them to open their mind and think about Darden as a designated school, raising awareness of what's unique about Darden, connecting alumni with amazing success stories to some of our students and applicants, closing those loops and creating opportunities for mentorships, celebrating women while they're here in all these various ways, ensuring that we are really state of the art and leading in terms of how we talk about community and the things that we do to improve society at large, but also our community in terms of dialect and dialogue and conversation. The Women's Summit has various aspects. It's part of the Women at Darden is the Women's Summit event in September, really showcase thought leaders from within the community, but also just in general, thought leaders in the business landscape around empowerment of women, disruptors of various kinds, and what it takes to be a disruptor, talking about various aspects, women in the media, what it is to lead through media, women in technology. There's some really interesting conversation, although I don't think that there's a session in this year's summit, but there's a very interesting conversation that I'm having with a few of our alums around women's service on boards. So I didn't know anything about serving on a board until a few years ago. And then I started serving on a few nonprofit boards. So I started small. And then I'm now on the Darden Foundation board. I've been a trustee for a few years. I serve on the board of 2 or 3 startups and technology companies. And it's incredible how it's helped me think about myself as a leader, think about myself as a business leader. It's given me credibility in all kinds of settings. And I learned just so many new things by being a board member, but we don't often think about that. So opening women's mind to various ways in which their career can kind of evolve. That's all part of these initiatives through Women at Darden.
And I told everybody you have endless energy, in addition to everything else we've talked about, you're on these boards as well. You mentioned the Women's Summit, and I know that you and Mike Lennox are leading a session and have a podcast called Good Disruption. Can you talk a little bit about Good Disruption and just maybe a glimpse into that?
Oh, it's been so much fun, actually. We started a few months ago and we weren't sure. I never did I never had a podcast before, and I wanted to experiment a little bit. And I believe we have 7 episodes out, maybe. I think it's 7. We're working on a few more. We choose, so Mike is a colleague, Mike Lennox is a colleague. He teaches in the strategy area. He focuses on digital transformation. Actually, his background is in kind of industrial engineering as well. So we share a common background. But we've been co-hosting a podcast where we, every episode, we choose a technology, electric vehicles, clean meat. What else have we chosen recently? Crypto, AI and music. We choose every episode, we choose a technology. We first describe it a little bit. What exactly is the disruption? What exactly is it doesn't always have to be tech in the pure sense of tech. So what is exactly is the technological innovation? What is the role of data or AI or technology or just something new? And then we typically bring in an expert to tell us a little bit more and for us to ask and gain some deeper kind of appreciation and awareness. And then we try to decide or make the call good, bad, or no disruption. So is this a good disruption, a bad disruption, or no disruption at all? And sometimes, we will disagree. Sometimes we will agree. I'll say that Mike is a very big fan of electric vehicles. He has at least 1 Tesla, and he's not a very strong believer of crypto. But it's been really lots of fun to learn about these technologies, really understand, take a deeper dive into emerging phenomena, and then try to learn from the experts that come and then make the call. So. it's been great. We talked about online learning and the evolution for higher ed. So yeah, it's been great.
That's great. And we just posted the podcast series in the chat. So I know I'm going to listen to it. It sounds amazing. And for those of you who would like to, please feel free to listen to Good Disruption, the series. There are a couple questions in the chat from students asking about how Darden engages with male allies. And I know there is a group called Men as Allies. Could you just say a couple words about men as allies at Darden?
Yeah, and actually the topic of allyship is growing in its momentum. And I think this is only an amazing thing, including, I believe, some conversations at the summit that will be focused on allyship. Because allyship, yes, it could be men serving as allies for women, but I think the topic of allyship is broader. Allyship is, maybe at some point we will talk about it as, just a general notion of how to interact with people around us and a general kind of sense of maturity and EQ. But really, allyship is about being thoughtful around other identities that aren't yours when you're in certain situations. Like, how do you display patience, awareness, understanding, empathy? How do you ask questions and expose even your own vulnerabilities when you have people around you that are different, right? Are of a different group. So that could be an ally that comes from some kind of majority group, represents a majority group, how they become allied to the various minorities, but it quickly moves into a space of intersectionality. So like, I'm going to serve as an ally to folks that have an identity that is different from mine, regardless of the majority kind of classification. I think no longer matters as much. It's really this notion of being an ally. Actually, there are very specific actions that you can take, and it is about pushing the understanding of what it is that I can do as an ally that will actually help and serve a good purpose in terms of supporting the people who I want to support, and not being an ally in the way that I believe that it is true, right? So it's about listening. It's about understanding what allyship can help, where are pivotal and critical moments where if you are an ally, you can really make a big difference. Tactics for doing that in a way that is conducive to growth and to further conversation and to foster positivity. All of those, I think, are not always, we don't always have those capabilities or tools at our fingertips. We aren't always exposed to them. And so through these conversations around allyship, we get trained and we get better at it. So yeah, it's been great to see the community embrace it. And I think that it's going to grow in terms of it, the topic of the day.
Yeah, I agree with you. And so nice to see that there are so many questions in the chat about it.
Wonderful.
Yael, you mentioned earlier the diversity in the classes that you teach. There's a question from Mazzino about how you manage diversity and culture shock in business school. And just before I turn it over to you, just wanted to let you know, Mazzino, that we just finished International Student Orientation. There is a week of International Student Orientation before Darden before Darden, and before the orientation for everyone. Very substantive sort of immersion into Darden and Charlottesville and the United States. And that just ended, and I participated in it a lot. And one of my favorite activities at Darden to see all the international students, 40% this year, introducing themselves from all over the world. So just wanted to let you know that there is a really thoughtful, substantive international student orientation. And now I'll turn it over to Yael to talk about how you manage diversity and help with culture shock in your classes.
Yeah, so I think the orientation helps in the sense that it gives folks more time on the ground, just time to get settled. I think the biggest struggle in my mind at the beginning of something as big as moving to a country to do a program like the MBA, not necessarily Darden specifically, but I think in general, the biggest challenge is really that you're trying to do everything at once. You're moving, you're finding a place to live, you don't really know the city, you don't really have a bank account, or you don't even know where to get your clothes cleaned or whatever it is. Like, it's just overwhelming. And you're trying to meet a bunch of new people from different parts of the world. And that creates the shock, I think, in my mind. And I'm not an expert, but from my experience, that creates the shock very often. If you diffuse it, and if you have more time to settle and you kind of get your bearings, I know for me, that's really important because then I can show up for the second half of interacting with people that are from different places. I can show up in a more calm and presentable way. I think somebody once gave me the advice around me as a working mother with a career. It's like the biggest thing for me is infrastructure. If I know that my kids are sorted, that I know where that everything is working and I know how my day is going to run and I have my food, my meals, my, logistics, then everything else is much easier for me to digest. The interaction with people, the get to know people, the work, the challenge of the work, everything else I can do because my life, so to speak, is settled. So the international orientation helps with that. And even students who come to Charlottesville a little bit early and get settled, I think it helps a little bit. Now, I think the second half of the question around culture shock, when you bring 300, if it's our residential program, that's 300 students. If it's our part-time students, it's 65 students. If it's our MBA students, 135 students, whatever the group is, it's always going to be a bit of a shock getting so many people exposed to so many people at once with the content. You're also learning and it's hard and it's intense. And so you're doing all of these things at once. So things that we do is really, again, part of what I think of as Darden's secret sauce. It's everything that we do outside the classroom, right? We get to know each other. And that's from the faculty to the staff, people serving lunch to the people who wash the boards to the dean. Everybody wants to get to know each other at an individual and personal level. Why? Exactly because it makes everything else possible, right? So students join Darden, they'll be hosted at faculty houses. They'll get to spend time. I mean, I think every student at Darden Fit graduates, they've seen at least one, if not, 5 or 6 faculties, living rooms and houses. And you see my dog jumping all over me and, getting into trouble. And you see my kids, whatever, getting me into trouble. And we kind of are people, right? And we present ourselves as people and the students get to know us as who we are and vice versa. The students come to our house or we travel abroad together or we wake up and go for runs together or go out and share, break bread, so to speak, or share food. Like all of those things matter and they matter. They allow us to break some barriers in terms of culture. They allow us to just learn about each other's culture. I went out to long after I finished teaching a few students, actually, maybe even after they graduated. I don't remember if it was before or after. Maybe it was right before students graduated. We went out for a meal, myself and a few students from Nigeria. And I just didn't have the time until then. None of us had the time to just sit down and be. And we had a miraculous gift of an evening that was a little bit impromptu. We sat around a table and we shared stories. And they told me all these unbelievable stories that I didn't know about their lives and growing up. And each was very different from the other. But I just got home and my mind was blown. And I've been doing this for 14, 15 years now. And my family has seen me with many, many different students. And I still am blown away by what I learn about my students and what they've been through and their stories and just how extraordinary they are. And I learn about their countries and I learn about their, interesting, just like things that happen in the world that I didn't know. So that's, I think, how we break barriers, by just getting to know each other as a person. And it's not about getting to know a culture, it's just kind of getting to know, a specific individual.
Right. And the richness of those meaningful relationships that you're describing, give everybody so much joy. It's amazing. I don't know if people picked up on it earlier, but Yael talked about seeing Lady Gaga last night with some Darden alumni. And so nice that you form those kinds of relationships outside of the classroom, that you go to concerts as well as having them over to your home. So that's just wonderful.
They're amazing people. And, I was in London earlier in the summer. I went to London for various reasons. I had a conference. I had, and as I mentioned earlier, I have family there, and due to I want to say gift, but it would be generous. The COVID that is the gift that keeps on giving in our world today. I had 2 extra tickets for a West End show. We went to see Wicked, and I had 2 extra tickets because 2 members of my family could not go. the night before, I happened to kind of, students of mine saw me on Instagram. They knew I was in London. We met up for an ice cream. And then I said to them, I have 2 extra tickets to Wicked. And so they ended up joining us to see the show. Right. So
so nice.
It was so nice. It was great.
That's great. I guess last question, and this is opportunity maybe for, a little inspiration. One of the things we've all read about a lot is, imposter syndrome and the extent to which women in some settings can experience imposter syndrome. And there's a really great question in here from Lynn. Have you experienced a difficult time where you personally had self-doubts, maybe some things not falling into place? And what did you do to overcome that?
Totally, Lynn. So I don't know that I formally knew the term imposter syndrome until I went through it myself. So I just didn't know it was a thing. And so I think part of the fact that people are talking about it helps. But when I was in my second year at Darden, and I can tell you in a lot of detail about this because I remember it vividly, and it's been a defining moment in my career. When I was in my second year at Darden, I just felt things unravel. And it could be a bunch of factors coming together, which I think it normally is. But for me personally, and Lynn, I'm sharing a very personal story when I can't even see your face. So you'll have to knock on my door when you're here. But I had my first year here at Darden. It was very successful. I did okay in the classroom. I had a few papers coming out. I felt on the top of the world. I had my dream job. I couldn't believe I nailed this job. It was really the place for me. And so my first year was great. Then my second year, I had my daughter. So I was post, giving birth. I got a couple papers rejected. My teaching was still good, but it wasn't wow. Because the first year was wow, I can do this. The second year, I can still do this, but okay, now what? So it was things were just deflated, and papers getting rejected is really hard, and some disagreement with colleagues and co-authors, and so it all came unraveling, and I started to doubt myself. It's oh, I'm going to be revealed now. My entire undergrad and master's and PhD was all a hoax, and I fooled everyone for the 16, 17 years it took me to graduate in those programs with distinction. It's no. I kept doubting myself that those distinctions were, I'm really hard and dedicated, and I can really work super hard, but am I really that smart? Really? Everything was kind of open to self-doubt, and can I survive in this classroom, and do I really have it? And all of that came, rushing through, which I assume is, what people would say is imposter syndrome, or at least that's how I later learned that was what I was feeling. And, it took me some time to first know and acknowledge and understand what I'm sensing and what I feel, find ways to, chip away at it and kind of disregard those feelings, or find the answer to those feelings by, reminding myself all of my accomplishments and things that I keep on doing and keep surviving, and surprising myself to reinforce the fact this is no longer a fluke, right? The fluke is when it doesn't go and things don't go well, or it's just not a fluke. It's just part of it, is that there are moments of struggle and moments of success. And I just need to know that when there's moments of struggle, it doesn't mean that the success was by chance. The success is still there, and it allows me to cope with the failures to kind of find the next success. So, I know that's 11 and we need to wrap up, but hopefully, Lynn, that made sense to you, and to say it happens, and we overcome it by chip, by building it up, and reminding ourselves that those moments of doubt are there for a reason, because they enable us to kind of continue to grow.
Yeah. Thanks so much for sharing that really personal story, Yael, and Lynn for asking the question, because I think a lot of people do experience that at least once, if not multiple points in their career, and such a great story.
And I think, Dawna, I've heard, a lot of people of various identities suffer from it. I think that some women use it maybe a little bit more often, or feel comfortable talking about it. But I actually think that that's changing too. I think more and more men are sharing and willing to talk about it, or interested in talking about it, or aware of it. And so I think it's becoming more of a norm of a conversation, which is good, because I think it's helpful for people to talk about. there's a lot of things that we go through either physically or mentally that we don't mention. And I think just by talking about it and recognizing actually you're not alone or
right. These are very universal, life experiences.
Right.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing yours. And so glad you pushed through it, because in addition to all the talents and expertise that you bring to Darden, it is absolutely unequivocally a true statement to say Yael is one of the most beloved members of the Darden community. So we're so grateful that you're here, and thank you so much for your time today. It's always a pleasure, Yael, and I'm so glad that all of our participants got to know you a little bit more. And thank you all so much for zooming in from all over the world. I am going to put my email in the chat. If you have any questions afterward that I can be helpful with, please don't hesitate to reach out. And I know we're going to send you a follow-up email with a couple of those videos about Yael. There's two videos that are just great, one about project management and one about her background in general, and each are no longer than 3 minutes long. So a little follow-up information to come, but really grateful for your time and interest in Darden. And we have lots of upcoming events on our website, so please check those out, and hope to see you at other virtual events or in person in Charlottesville. Thanks, everyone. Yes, thank you, Yael, and thank you, Maggie and Haley behind the scenes.
Yes, thank you, Haley and Maggie, for making sure that we do this properly. And I put my Twitter and my LinkedIn in the chat, so if folks want to connect, I look forward to connecting with them. Yeah.
Great. Okay, bye, everybody. Thanks so much.
Bye, everybody.
And that was a conversation between Admissions Dean Dawna Clarke and Senior Associate Dean for Professional Degree Programs Yael Grushka-Cockayne from a recent Women at Darden event. As always, if you have any comments, suggestions, requests, anything you'd like for us to cover here on the podcast, we're all ears. We can be reached at Darden, that's DARDEN, @virginia.edu. Until next time, stay safe, be well, and thanks for listening.